so we can share it with people if they need it. I guess we'll go from there. So I don't have much by way of general announcements. I don't really have any. I did want to ask a question. Has anybody experienced difficulty getting tutor assistance? Because I'm hearing from a couple students, they tried to get appointments with tutors and there were none, or they tried to get appointments and then they made an appointment and then the tutor didn't show up. Is that anybody having that experience? I would just like to be able to report that.
I haven't had any experience with them not showing up, but if you don't plan ahead, a lot of times when you need it, there's not a spot available if it's kind of last minute.
So it seems like maybe there's not sufficient
if you know
time
if you're
slots for the number of students.
if you're getting close to like the end of the week or whatever, and you didn't already have an appointment, you're probably not going to get one. So
Okay.
that's just been my experience.
Okay, no, that helps. And I know they said to me they lost a tutor like mid-semester, or and had to and they're working on replacing them. So maybe just getting that one more will help with that.
Do they have open lab?
Like an open tutor time where you can just go in there?
Yeah.
They have, let me look back at the announcements.
I didn't see that when I was last, but it's been a while.
Yeah, in some semesters we've had that, but
that would be nice if they had that again.
Yeah, the open lab is so much easier.
I'm just pulling this up to see.
I did not see that in there the last time I was in there, but it's been a couple weeks for me. So
right. Yeah, it looks like they just have scheduled appointments. No, and I've seen that. The part of the reason I do this meeting is because I found that when I say to students, hey, just email me for an appointment if you want to go over something, that almost nobody ever does. Whereas when we do this as a meeting, we get 6 or 10 people here. So well, we'll say 4 or 8. How about that? 8's a big night for us. Anyway, but just having a regular time. So I don't have any other sort of general broad announcements. Any questions that are general, not about like specific questions or anything yet? We'll get to specific questions in the future, but any general questions?
Is the exam next week? Is that due Wednesday?
I believe so, yes. Let me double check it, but
and that's just staying the same. It'll be on these 2 chapters or whatever.
Correct.
Okay.
And I will tell you that historically, from a data perspective, that exam 2 is typically the worst as far as average student scores. So I tell you that so you don't feel too discouraged if you didn't do well on exam 2, but also like that doesn't mean you can be like, oh, exam 3 is easy, I can let off. I wasn't saying it for that purpose, just to say that don't get discouraged. Exam 2 is typically historically a tough one. I think the concept of adjusting entries is something most people would like a little more time to master. And most people kind of go into that exam feeling a little either underprepared or feeling like, oh, I totally have this, and then find out they didn't fully understand it. And so it's usually a tough one. And the next one's usually not as bad for most people score on average a bit higher. Any other questions that I can try to answer before I go into a little bit of a conversation on inventory management and inventory aging?
Brother Fox, so
Yeah.
I think I remember it was maybe a couple weeks ago, you had said that our lowest quiz and quiz access get dropped.
Correct.
None of the exams, right?
Unfortunately,
all
no.
of the exams are part of our grade.
Yeah, that'd be lovely if that were the case, but that's not the case.
But they do drop the lowest of each of those quiz access and regular quiz grades. Okay.
Yeah.
I have a general question. I guess this, I don't know, I don't know what the best way for the support discussion board. I found that to be like super helpful, but I guess in general, like what is the, I'm just trying to gauge like the walkthrough videos and like what the, from the instructor perspective, like I understand like you don't want, they don't want us just like, hey, here's the answer number, whatever. But I don't know, I feel like the walkthrough videos are super helpful to kind of understand, because from reading through the book, especially like I presented this week, I feel like it almost sometimes doesn't really line up specifically with like the examples in the quiz access and the quiz. Like it's the same kind of things, but I don't know if that makes sense. Like I'll look at their example, just the layout and everything. I'm just like, it just doesn't mesh the same way sometimes. And so I guess I'm just wondering like your perspective on like, you know, someone posted like another video from another instructor. Is that like discouraged? Or I'm not saying it's like bad or anything. I'm just trying to understand like how much are we supposed to just be trying to figure out on our own, or is it, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Sure.
Because I feel like I could use a walkthrough on every single one of them sometimes. I mean, I don't, you know, maybe that's just me. I don't know.
Right. Well, so I'll tell you, as an instructor, I'm reluctant to give too many walkthroughs. I think there's power in people puzzling through things and figuring them out on their own. A lot of my learning comes when I fail on something and then use a check and then like go, oh, that's why it was this way. Like, and so you hate to just give too much. That being said, you know, I don't think there's anything wrong with Googling things, especially the quiz access and the quizzes are open. They're open resource. Okay. So you can go out there and they're part of your learning process. You know, I would call them formative assessments, right? They're measuring what you've learned, but they're still part of forming the knowledge. And so if now you can't like go out there and just like share somebody else's stuff. Like I found this and that doesn't count as your grade, right? Because again, part of the assignment is I don't know about you, but usually the one that you have to work out, you know that one better than any other because you did it 5 times and walked through it. And but say you found a really awesome video out there from someone, or say an instructor in another class or something, or online. I wouldn't have a problem with you sharing that. You know, that's great. In fact, I'd tell you to share it to the tutoring resources page where it can help people across all the different sections of this course. You know, all the videos I make for you guys on that page, I share to that. And I know that students in other classes use it sometimes. And I think I don't know how their teachers feel about that. I think most teachers are cool with it, but you might get some old school dude that would be like, no, learning is suffering or something. I don't know.
Yeah, generally it seems like a lot of the questions across the board are like different numbers too. So there's a lot of it where even if I see that, I'm like, I still have to do all the work myself. It's mainly just the guidance and understand the concept. So I appreciate that. I was just, yeah. And it makes sense. I'm sure I've seen a bunch of, specifically from me, messages to you where I'm like, hey, I need help. Hey, I got it. So a lot of it is, like you said, I've worked out a lot of stuff and it has been helpful to just like eventually figure out what I messed up myself.
Right. And I will say that, you know, if you ever want me to do one of those videos, I can't always do it that day. Like I try, like I know I just added 2 to this chapter's this week because of some questions someone asked me for. But I am limited by what's going on. You know, this is a side job for me, so I have to take care of business at the people who pay my main paycheck first, and then I will try to, like, if you're really stuck on one, I'll try within a day or so to get a video up. And if I can't, I'll tell you I can't. I'll just be like, sorry, buddy, or something. I don't know how I'd say it. Okay. Okay, let's take a look at, let's see, chapter 5. Let me share my screen with you. So you're probably into this chapter enough already to know the difference between these different cost flow assumptions. But I'll try to explain them, and then the reason why it matters. And the reason why it matters, I'll start with that, is that we often don't know which item we're selling when we're selling them. You know, so if you know, I grew up in a business, a little store. My mother would make me deal with the inventory, which I hated as a kid. But like we sold a lot of canned goods, and it was like a little general store kind of store. And so like, we would have 20 cans of corn sitting there on the shelf, and maybe they were bought from 2 or 3 different cases of corn. And maybe one was bought from a case of corn we bought 3 months ago and one we just bought last week. And so we may have paid 2 different prices for those cases of canned corn. And so anytime someone would buy a can of corn, we wouldn't know if it was the can we paid 38 cents a can for, or if it was the can we paid 40 cents a can for. And so this question, when we get to the end of the month or the end of the year of what's my cost of goods sold, becomes difficult to track, especially with small, relatively homogeneous items like canned food. Okay. And so what we have to do is make some estimate or an assumption. And so these cost flow assumptions are just the way that business owners and accountants came up with to take a guess at, which items are we selling, and so what cost do they have. There's one not on this page, which is called the specific identification method. That one gets used usually for businesses that have expensive items that they sell. So car dealerships would be an example of a business that uses specific identification method, because every single car has a unique identifier called a VIN, vehicle identification number. And so when they buy that car or they get it on a trade-in, they know exactly how much they paid for it. They can then measure exactly how much time and effort the mechanics put into getting it ready to sell. And so they can look and see exactly what their cost is on that vehicle. That makes sense when you're selling items that go between $20,000 and $70,000, that you would want to know specifically. But for cans of corn, which cost 38 cents or something like that, it's not as important that we know, was that the can that I paid 38 cents for, the one I paid 40 cents for. So the 3 methods that we use are first in, first out. Some people say FIFO and some say FIFO. And I don't even know if there's a correct one. Just first in, first out. You call it whatever you want. Anyway, so what that means is we're assuming that the first items of inventory we purchase are the first items that are getting sold. So like in my pantry, we have this little rack, right, where we put the vegetables in there and then they roll around and they come out. So we're always like taking the oldest one first, right? And then we load the new ones we buy from the top. So we're always keeping our stuff rotated. And that's how the first in, first out method works. It assumes that the items we're selling are the oldest ones, the first ones we purchased. Okay. Last in, first out is the opposite of that. It assumes that the most recently purchased items are the ones that we're selling. This makes sense for businesses that have, I think Apple's a good example. Kind of when the new iPhone 13 came out, suddenly nobody wanted the iPhone 12. Okay, so typically they're selling a lot more of their more recently purchased or more recently developed product than they are of their older product. And then the weighted average is sort of like buying the middle ground, right? So since we don't know if it's which ones we're selling, what we'll do is we'll just add up the cost of all of our units that were available during that time period and divide that by the number of units that were available to come up with an average. And then we'll use that average cost. Okay. So that's the 3 methods we use with cost flow assumptions. And then the 4th being specific identification, which isn't an assumption because you know exactly how much it costs. So let's see. Again, if you have a question along the way, someone's asking me to look at exercise number 8. Is that exercise number 8 in the quiz access or on the quiz, or?
I think it's the one before the quiz.
The quiz access assignment?
Yeah, but it
Okay.
is the lesson before, so you can get if I don't talk to you.
Okay, you broke up a lot there. I'm sorry, I couldn't make out what you said. Okay, well, when we get done with this, we'll take a look at it and hopefully we'll have the right one. Okay, so our cost flow of our inventory. One way to think of figuring out how much our inventory costs us is that we know that whatever we had in inventory at the beginning of the month or the year, the time period we're measuring, plus anything we purchased, those two things together are going to be our merchandise that's available for sale. And then our merchandise that's available for sale is going to be either stuff we sold, which will be our cost of goods sold, or stuff that's still sitting there at the end of the month or the year. Okay, that's our ending inventory. And so just knowing this interrelationship really opens up this whole chapter for me. So again, beginning inventory plus net purchases equals merchandise available for sale. And then usually in real life, when we're doing it, like my mom would make me do it, I would have to go with a little notebook, a spiral notebook, and I would count, like I would write like corn, and then I would have to count like the cans of corn on the shelf and like write down 12 cans of corn or whatever were there. And so we would know how much we had at the beginning of the year, how many cans of corn. We would also know how much we purchased during the year because we wrote it down every time we purchased some. So we knew our merchandise available for sale. So then I would count up how much was there at the end of the year and then subtract that from the merchandise available for sale. And that would give me the cost of goods sold. Actually, it would give me the units sold, and then I could calculate the cost of goods sold. Okay. And think
What
about
about-
that. Yeah.
Sorry. And this may be kind of looking at it outside of, but so when this is happening, like if this were actually happening in a business, the purchase, like when they purchase more inventory, that would be recorded when it happened, right? The actual like cash going out or whatever. And then the actual sales, the revenue coming in when those sales happen would be recorded right when they happened. But the cost of goods sold would be an adjusting entry because it's periodic. Like, is that how it would work? Or
yeah. Yes.
Okay.
So in a especially like my mother's store, okay, we would do this periodically because we didn't have a barcode scanning system or anything like that where we could keep track of them on a perpetual basis.
Mhm.
And so we would just record at the end of the year what our cost of goods sold expense was, or actually at the end of each month. Okay, so we could find that expense. Most modern systems now use a perpetual system because it's pretty easy to just take your software system and say, got a case of corn, add 24 quantity, scan the barcode, and that adds those into inventory. And then each time you sell one, it deducts one from inventory. So it keeps track on a perpetual basis.
Okay.
So only usually smaller businesses or businesses that have a very limited number of items are using a periodic system anymore. I think when we were a kid, we looked at barcode scanning software and it was $300,000. Now you can buy QuickBooks point of sale for, like 1,000. And so it's just much more affordable. All right, let's see. So the things that we're going to see in our periodic system that we're going to be measuring on our balance sheet, we'll have our inventory. And it usually won't say ending inventory on the balance sheet. It will just say merchandise inventory or inventory, something like that. And then on the income statement, we'll have a cost of goods sold. And we saw that in the last chapter. Those are kind of the new items that popped up on our financial statements. Recognize that sometimes it's easy to think of inventory in terms of the physical flow of goods, meaning for me at least, I kind of picture like the cans of corn coming off of the supply truck and then being added to my shelf and then being sold to the customers. But it just doesn't always work that way. In other words, sometimes the cans of corn on the shelf get all mixed up and we don't know which ones we're selling. And so the physical flow doesn't always follow our cost flow. Even though I'm assuming first in, first out, for example, it's possible I sold some of my newer ones first. And so this is just an estimate for us because we need to come up with a number from an accounting standpoint. All right, so this just kind of breaks down how you might track You can see this company, we don't know what they're selling, but they just have units of something they're selling. So there we have their beginning inventory, and then we're tracking the purchases, and then recording the sales, purchases, sales. And then at the end of the period, we know that we purchased, that we had a total of 55 units available for sale, which were the 10 we had at the beginning, plus the ones we purchased. We know that we have that the cost of those goods total was $5,990. We know we sold 43 units and that we have 12 units left in inventory. What we don't know is which 12 units they are, right? Are they the ones that cost us $91 or the ones that cost us $106 or $115 or $119? We don't know that. And so we have to use some assumption to come up with that. And that's what the whole chapter is about. All right. So I'm going to go through just some examples of each method. So the first is the the specific identification method. So in real life, you would just know I sold these items because you keep track of them as you sell them. Okay. But for a book problem, they're going to have to tell you something like, which ones you sold. We sold 8 of the bikes that cost 91 and 12 of the ones that cost 106. And so to work one of these problems out, it's pretty easy because all you got to do is say, is just figure out which units you sold. So my cost of goods sold is really going to be 8 times 91 plus 12 times 106 plus 2 times 91 plus 3 times 106 plus 15. You really are just calculating the cost of the goods you sold. Like it's almost one of those things that's so easy that you're like, am I doing this right? This can't be it, because it's really just adding up the cost of the goods I sold. But it really is. So in that case, it would come out to $4,582 is the cost of goods sold. If we wanted to figure out the value of our ending inventory, we would just take the total available, the 5,990, subtract the cost of goods sold, and that would tell us we still have $1,408 worth of inventory sitting there at the end of the month. So really, in a lot of ways, this is the easiest way because it's going to tell you in the problem, these are the ones that you sold. So here's a first in, first out scenario. So again, let me go back up to the data we have. We had 55 units available that we could sell this month. Okay. And we know we sold 43 of them. So for us to figure out what was our cost of goods sold, what we're going to do is we're just going to, I hate the way this is laid out. Let's just look at it. So we're going to assume that the first units in are the first ones out. Okay. So if I sold 43, all I do, because you'll notice here, they're listed in order chronologically of their acquisition. Okay. So if I sold 43, I'm just going to say I must have sold all 10 of those. They're the oldest 10. All 15 of those, that accounts for 25 of them. And then I must have sold 18 of those, right? Because 10 plus 15 plus 18 adds up to 43. So I just go to the oldest ones, and then it's pretty easy. I just go 10 times 91 plus 15 times 106 plus 18 times 115 will tell me my cost of goods sold. And the value of my remaining inventory would be the 2 units still left at 115 plus 10 times 119 would be the cost of my remaining inventory. And I swear that this chapter is one of those that, like, when you're first learning it, you're like, this seems so complicated. And then after you get comfortable with it, you're like, why did this seem so hard at first? Well, because it's new. That's why, like when someone's trying to explain a card game to you and they've played it 100 times and you're like, unless you're playing like Exploding Kittens or one of those games that has 8 trillion rules, then even after I've played it a bunch of times, I'm still like, I don't know, the unicorn game, whatever it is my kids bring over. Too old for that newfangled games. All right, so that's first in, first out. So in essence, we're going to say we sold the 10 units. So here what they're doing is to find our, they're finding their ending inventory by saying all 10 of the units purchased at 119 plus 2 units purchased at 115 gives them the ending inventory. So again, I'll show you. So they said, hey, we have 12 units left at the end. So it must be all 10 of these plus 2 of these. Those are the ones left over because we sold all the older ones. And really, once you figure out one of those two things, the ending inventory, then you can just calculate the cost of goods sold by taking cost of goods available for sale minus ending inventory gives us cost of goods sold. And we could do it the other way. We could calculate cost of goods sold and take goods available for sale minus cost of goods sold would give us ending inventory. So really, we can go about it either direction. So in last in, first out, we're doing, how do you say it? The same thing, but in reverse, right? We're just assuming now that it's the newest units that we're actually selling and the oldest units that are still sitting there in inventory at the end of the period. So I'm going to scroll back up to that so we can see it. So now we're in the same situation. We know we have 12 units left. Well, which 12 units is it? Well, it's going to be the oldest ones. So it's going to be all 10 of those plus 2 of these. Or if we're asking what's our cost of goods sold, then I would start here and say, well, I sold 43 total units. So it's going to be these 10 units plus these 20. That gives me 30 I've accounted for, plus another 13 of these units. That would be my cost of goods sold. So again,
I have a quick question.
yeah,
And this isn't general, so sorry that this is like in the middle of like this explain just a principle, but like for the exam, are the numbers going to be, this is like so basic compared to the one that I had to present this week. I feel like, I mean, not basic, but the numbers are a lot larger. So, you know, you had to do a lot more addition here. It's like pretty obvious. Oh, you're only looking for 12 units. So you're just kind of stopping on those first 2 entries or bottom 2 entries. Like, are the ones on the exam, I mean, I know you can't like give away specifics, but are we going to be doing a lot of calculating, or is it going to be pretty basic like the book?
I'll tell you, I think be prepared for anything. I mean, anything's fair game as long as it follows the pattern, right? Do I think they're going to be crazy ones? No, then they're not. Okay, I'll just tell you that but they may be more in line with what you're seeing in the homework than with, like, this is a simplified example, right? To just go through. Like, dang it. Why can't they all be in round numbers too? So nothing ends with a 2 or something. I teach business statistics and and students are always like, round to the 4th decimal place, and you're like, nah, nothing feels right at the 4th decimal place. All right. So those are the first 2 methods: first in, first out, last in, first out. Again, the method they used in this example was to calculate ending inventory, because it's pretty easy when there's only 12 units left. And then subtract that from the cost of goods available to find the cost of goods sold. And then the other one is the weighted average system. And I think people think of this as like, oh, this is really hard. I think it's the easiest one, personally.
All right. I've got a quick question before we go on. What's
Yeah.
an example? I mean, I understand like first in, first out for like a grocery store or whatever. What's an example of who would use last in, first out, or kind of just help me understand that a little.
Sure. Well, the example I just used a minute ago was like Apple, because they're selling products that the newer version of it is going to be the more sought after product, and so,
Okay. That's an example of
but I will tell you that, again, the law does not require that it matches up with that your assumptions match up with your physical flow of inventory. So some businesses will just decide last in, first out gives them the results they want more. What you're not allowed to do legally is you can't keep switching from first in, first out to last in, first out as your prices fluctuate to find the one that gives you the most, let's say, gives you the lowest expense so you can maximize what your net income says, or the opposite. Some people would like to minimize their net income so that it reduces their tax burden. So
Yeah.
you have to kind of choose one and then stick with it. And then if you make a major change to it, the IRS audits you, they're going to want some justification why you changed.
Huh.
Alicia, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, hi, Brother Fox. Sorry, while you're on the LIFO, if you would, for the life of me, on question number 5 in the quick access, I got the FIFO right, but I, for some reason, didn't get the LIFO
Okay.
while you're on it.
Okay. Well, so we'll take a look at that. We can look at that after we finish this little presentation, and we'll pull those up and take a look. All right, so let's take a look at weighted average. So with weighted average, here's all we do. Okay. All we do is I'll even roll all the way back up to our original data. Okay, so this is what it started us with, right? We just take our total cost divided by our total units available for sale, and that will give us an average cost per unit. So now I'll go back down here. So we take our total cost, $5,990 divided by 55 units, and that comes out to $108.91 in weighted average cost per unit. So then to figure out my ending inventory, I would just take that average cost, 108.91, times the number of units in ending inventory, which is 12 in this example. And that gives me 1,307. And I can find my cost of goods sold just by subtracting that from so same process. All we're doing is figuring out this average cost per unit. And that is just by adding up the total cost, adding up the total units, dividing total cost by total units. So a couple more slides here. So what happens if we make an error on this? This is a little confusing, and I think the terminology understated and overstated can sometimes be confusing. Like you're like, what does that mean? Just remember that understated means that a number on your financial statement is lower than what it really should be. That means it's understated or below what it should be. If something is overstated, then it means that it's higher than what it really should be. So what they're trying to show us here is that if our ending inventory is understated, that's going to lead to our cost of goods sold being overstated. And since cost of goods sold is an expense, if our expense shows higher than it should be, then our net income is going to look lower. So our net income will be understated. And then that's going to cause problems into the next year because we close out all those accounts. And so our cost of goods sold going into the next year will be understated, which will lead to our net income being overstated in the following year. Okay. And so and the reason that happens is because we have our ending inventory for year 1 here will also become our beginning inventory for year 2. And so what they're trying to get at is just recognize these things are all interrelated with each other. So people are always like, I hate accounting class because if you make an error up here, then you got like problems all throughout it. And I'm like, yeah, that's just accounting in general. If I make an error in 1 year, it's going to carry forward into the next year. And so then I get double fired, right, by the boss, or not really. I mean, you try to catch your errors before you send it on to the boss, but that's real life. Go ahead, Katie.
Now, would that be the case only if it wasn't found? Like, say, they discover it after year 1 finishes, but then, you're into year 2 and you need to fix, you need to fix it. Like, did you still have, or is that just you made an error here and now this is how it trickles when it isn't fixed?
Correct.
Or,
yeah. If you find the error, then you make an adjustment.
Okay.
So if it's a big enough error that it's material, you'd go back and actually change year 1's records and file an amended return.
Okay.
If it was something minor, then you would just do an adjusting entry, to account for it and move forward.
Okay.
All right. And then on the balance sheet, same idea. If our ending inventory is understated, since inventory is an asset, that's going to lead to our assets being understated and our equity understated. Mostly I just want to familiarize you with these terms, because when you get questions with those terms, you're like understated, overstated. I don't even know what you're talking about. And I think that's really all I had for this chapter. And so I wanted to just take a look then at these quiz access problems that, who was it, Lucimara, I think, and Alicia, is that who asked for the 2 different ones? So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a second because I forget what I have underneath this, and it might be the grades page, and I don't want to let everybody see everybody else's grades. Some people will be like, yeah, that's my grade, and other people will be like, why'd you have to show the whole world that, right? Oh, it wasn't the grades, I would have been fine. So give me a second, I'm going to open. Oh, I love you, McGraw-Hill. Sorry, there's been a problem. Please wait a moment and try again. Has that been a moment?
While
There it
we're
is.
waiting, oh,
I
you
got
got
it.
it working. Okay, I'll wait and hold my question.
Okay. Well, okay, let's see. Go to connect. Chapter 5. Quiz access. All right, so we're gonna first look at number 5, specifically the last in, first out section, right? Is that right?
Yeah, I got the first in. For some reason, the last life was not adding up for me.
Okay, so I'm gonna actually pull this up in a view that is already has the answers in it. So we're just gonna look at them. So let me share my screen. Okay. So here's 5. It gives us all of this information up here. My favorite thing is scrolling up and down, so I'm really glad they have that. I think I showed you guys, I just use like the snipping tool and take a picture of it and then split screen it so I don't have to keep scrolling. I don't know if there's a better way to do it, but mostly it just makes me feel good to complain. So I try to do that as much as possible. So, so let's look at B. So B, under last in, first out, it wants the ending inventory and the cost of goods sold, right? So here's how I would go about this. I know that I purchased 474 units, or not purchased, I have a total of that because I had 110 at the beginning of the period, plus I've added these others. So my total units available for sale are 474. And I know that I've sold 348. So since I'm not super great at doing math in my head, I used to be, but then middle age set in upon me. 474 minus 348. So I must have 126 units still there at the end of the month. Okay, that's because I started with 474, I sold 348, so there's still 126 left. So I can go about this one of 2 ways. I can say, one, which units are still left, and then that would give me my ending inventory, or I could say, well, which units did I sell? I can do it either way. So let's go, we're going to say last in, first out. Let's try to figure out which 126 units are still there at the end of the month. Okay. And so I would assume that I sold these newer units and that the older units are still there in inventory. So that would mean I sold all 90. I mean, sorry, not sold. My ending inventory would contain, actually, I think I'm confusing people a little bit. So I'm going to assume that these units, because here's where my cost is on the units. Okay. So if I have 126 units left, I'm going to assume that it's all 110 of those plus 16 of those units. That would be 126. So then I can figure that out and I can just say 110 times, whoops, now it's being dumb. 110 times $2 per unit, because that was the cost on those, plus 16 times $3 a unit. That will give me the cost of goods, or not the cost of goods, but the value of my ending inventory, 268.
So sorry, I mean, but are we doing the FIFO or the LIFO?
LIFO.
Okay, I'm just, so on LIFO, you're working backwards, but wouldn't it be from November 19th to the June 30th?
It,
That
it,
would go
it,
to
would
go from the bottom?
it would be if I was calculating my cost of goods sold, but I'm calculating my ending inventory.
Okay, sorry,
So
I'm not trying to confuse.
no,
It's just
that's
like,
okay.
this is the stuff that I'm like, what is going on? Okay.
Yeah,
no,
so you can approach it from either direction. Okay. We could, so whatever works best for you. So you can either say, I want to figure out how much it is still sitting there in inventory. And if that's the case, because I know that I have 126 units still sitting there in inventory. I got that by taking 474 minus 348. Then I would assume the ones in inventory are the 126 oldest units, which is these 110 plus 16 of these. Or I could approach it from the other direction and say, I want to know what my cost of goods sold was. I know I sold 348 units. So I'm going to take, I sold those 48 plus those 160, which is 208, plus another 140 of those units, right? So I can do it either direction. And so, yeah, but it does make it confusing when you're showing people and in their brain, they're doing it from one direction and you're doing it from the other. And they're like, whoa. Anyway, so yeah, so honestly, the reason I decided to find the ending inventory is because I was only going to have to deal with 126 units to do that instead of dealing with 348 units. In other words, you know, and I often do this using like Excel. It helps me keep track of things.
You made it sound so much simpler than what I had going on in the book. Was trying to, okay, but yeah, that makes a lot.
Okay. Again, let me just, for the sake of people watching at home too, maybe you guys have it by now, but I could say I could do my units acquired. So I had my 110 units at the beginning, right? That cost $2, and 156 units that cost $3, and 160 units that cost $4, and 48 units that cost $5. So that's just all of this information right here. And then I know I sold 348 units. And so my ending inventory is going to be total units available minus the number I sold. So once I've done that, then I just have to like identify which ones either that I sold or which ones that are still there. Okay. So I could do it this way. I could say which ones are still in ending inventory. Using last in, first out, I'm going to assume it's these oldest ones. So I'm going to assume it's all 110 of those still sitting there, plus 16 of those, which will give me my total of 126 units in inventory. And then the cost per unit times the number of units. So that will give me the total value of my ending inventory. So
I see what you're saying now. It makes a lot more sense.
Okay.
Sorry, I wasn't trying to make it complicated for him, but because it's like, I think I was thinking of it like, yeah, we sold everything at the bottom for sure, and it's going to be one of those, and you just, it's like the same thing, but you came from the top saying, yeah, assume that. So
Okay.
sorry, I wasn't trying to confuse him, but that makes perfect sense now that you kind of drew out like that and said it. So I
Okay,
got
good.
you.
Good. Well, no, I'm glad I was able to walk through it from a couple directions, and that, you know, hopefully, because remember, even though there's only like 8 of us here tonight, like 9 of us here tonight, there's other people going to watch this later. So a lot of times I'll think, yeah, we got it good, and someone later will be like, that didn't really help me at all, man. So okay, let's take a look at number 8.
So Brother Fox, to get
Yes.
the cost of goods, it'll just be the sold amount minus the inventory.
Yeah. So yes. So we can either, we know that our total cost of goods that was available was 1,568. So we can either subtract 268 from that 1,568, and that will tell us the cost of goods sold. Or if we wanted, we could go through the process of right? Identifying which units were sold and multiplying it all out, but it's easier to just subtract it. So I would just say cost of goods available for sale, which we figured out right here. 1,568. So you know that cost of goods available for sale minus ending inventory, which was 268, gives us our cost of goods sold.
Perfect, thank you.
All right. So let's take a look at number 8. Oh, there's not a number 8. So I don't,
She added in the chat, it was from last week. I'm not sure if it was the quiz access or the actual quiz.
okay. So the number 8 is from week 8 and it was an income statement. Okay. All right, give me a second here. Or was it one of those evil financial statement analysis? I'm learning that nobody likes those. They're that kid at school that everybody wants to beat up, but they don't because they're nice kids.
I
All right.
don't mind them, but I don't like that we can't check on them. Like that the check your answer is off on those
Right.
ones.
So
But
so do
isn't
recognize,
so bad.
right? Do recognize that all of them together is only like 5% of the total grade, right? So if you're like, oh, I struggle with those and I'm only getting like 70% on them, it's not going to hurt your grade nearly. Like focus your energy on quiz access, quiz, and exams. Like those are the bulk of the grade. And that, because I think sometimes people get like super freaked out because they're struggling with one thing, and it's like recognize they're weighted, and that helps a little. So
Those financial, there's more than one attempt on them as well, right?
right.
So what I did is I was taking screenshots of all the problems and stuff too. So I was able to like see what I missed and then go back and focus on it. There was a couple I just took twice and yeah.
And it's hard for me to provide good videos because the numbers don't change. So then it feels a little more like cheating to me. Whereas when I know you have different numbers, it forces you to have to work through it, you know? All right, so we're looking at Lucimara. Do you remember, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name well, so sorry if I'm butchering it. Do you remember if it was the quiz access or the quiz from last week?
I think week 8, that's showing week 7.
Okay,
So.
yeah. Quiz access. Okay, I'm gonna find it, I swear. There it is. Okay, quiz access. Chapter 4. Then we'll wait. Is it ridiculous how much we expect to have like immediate things? And so if it takes like 12 seconds to load, we're like, what is this? All right. Just feels wrong. So let's see, we're gonna look at number 8. And there's the income statement. So this is the right one, I hope. Let's see, Fit for Life Foods reports the following income statement accounts. So it looks like, yeah, so it just looks like they're giving us a ton of info. I call that I'm being information vomited on. This feels like all over you with all of this data. And it wants us to sort of figure out where it all fits on the income statement. And honestly, you know, if I had this, like if someone handed me this as a worksheet on paper, I would like totally be like labeling each of these, right? I'd be like, that's an other revenue. That's an expense. Like I'd be doing that first so that I could really organize the information in my brain. And so other than, I mean, it doesn't require a lot of calculating as much as just putting things in the right areas. And so the first thing that's new from income statements we had before is our sales, which isn't new, but then we have to subtract our sales discounts and our sales returns and allowances. And then those two totaled up. And then sales minus those two gives us our net sales. Then our cost of goods sold. And so net sales minus cost of goods sold gives us our gross profit. And if I'm not helping you by just sort of walking through it, please let me know. Um, okay, well, I think it's just a different name because of the algorithm. Okay, so it's probably the same problem. So are you saying you'd like me to pull up your specific one? Because I can do that, but then recognize that everybody will be able to see your specific problem, if that's okay with you. Okay. So let me stop sharing for a second, and then we will. Sorry, there's a whole process I have to go through to. And I have two sections. So first I figure out which section you're in, section 29. Switch sections to that. There's like this whole rigmarole. Thanks, McGraw-Hill. And then performance, I go to student performance.
Is it okay if we use Control F on the financial statements? Some of the questions, I'm like, I don't know where this is, and I'm like scrolling through the document, and I just hit Control F, search the word they're looking for, and then it pulls up
Yeah.
all the.
Again, why would you not use all the tools at your disposal, right? Like, I don't
I
think
felt
that's
like it's
cheating at
like
all.
dirty, but it's like available because it's just like, here we go. I'll just, and then it helps me narrow down to where it specifically. I mean, there'll be 3 entries because it's like Apple, Google, and Samsung, but
Right.
yeah,
No,
those are kind of a doozy.
look, like real life accounting, like never once have I been like expected to produce financial statements while in the middle of the Gobi Desert without a computer. Like I always have access to all resources, And so that's why I think it's a little crazy how closed book this course is set up, but that's not my choice. I think you need to understand principles and then be able to draw information. I think that makes you a better accountant. But you're not training, these aren't accountant classes, these are learning accounting principles. And then if you decide to be an accountant, you'll go on. So weeks, sorry, let's see.
It looks like the Save the Earth is actually in the quiz. So it's number 8 in the quiz and not the
Okay.
quiz process.
Okay, good to know. So I'm looking at week 8 quiz. Lucy Mara, you did amazing on this. You're like, you don't need my help. You tore this quiz up. You beat up this quiz and took its lunch money. All right, let's see. So I'm going to share the screen. And so I am not seeing where you missed anything here. You're talking about selling expense. Oh, okay, so yeah, okay.
I think sometimes the extra lines, because McGraw-Hill just kind of will have extra
Right.
lines there sometimes that throw you off.
Right. So you didn't miss anything. You got 10 out of 10 points on this. And so I think you were worried that you missed something here. Just so you know, when I started teaching accounting back in the day, you seriously you just had to get all this information like this, and then you had a blank piece of paper and you just had to make an income statement. So in some ways, these drop down menus actually make it easier. But anyway, that was in my day. I didn't think I was old enough to do those, but we walked uphill in the snow both ways, and we had to do it on a blank piece of paper. So short answer is, well, it's not. I mean, it's showing that you got full points, 10 out of 10 points. So I mean, I don't mean to disappoint you, but you did well. So I'm about out of time. I have another class that starts at 6, and I know I actually told someone that I was going to meet with them after this class, but we ran out of time. Anthony, was that you that I was going to get together with you after this?
Yeah, that's fine. I'll shoot you a message on Canvas and we'll figure something out, or however.
I apologize, or I mean, I can reach out to you when I get done with this other class and see if you still have time. I don't know. And so I just,
Yeah.
the last few meetings we've done in about 35 minutes. So I thought, oh, we'll have a few minutes, but today we had some other stuff to look at. So, but it was good, actually. I'm glad we went through them. Okay, so I appreciate you all being here, and I hope there's some value in it for you. And did we not say a prayer when we started? Oh man, it's kind of like when my kids just start eating and I'm telling them, you're probably gonna get sick now. Hasn't happened yet, so I guess we'll chalk that up to safe food supply rather than some sort of power of heaven protecting them. But anyway, so is there anybody who would be willing to offer a closing prayer?
Yeah, I can do it.
Thanks.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we're so thankful that we've come together to learn from Brother Fox, and we're grateful for his wisdom. Pray for our class that we may be able to be enlightened and problems that we have trouble with. We love thee, Father, very much, and we thank thee for our education. We say these things in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good night, everyone.